Myself and about 30-ish creators were all invited to sit down and talk to Bungie about the delays regarding Destiny 2 and the final shape. I'm sure you've probably heard the news and you know all the specifics. The truth of the matter is that this entire summit was basically an early access preview for all of the stuff that you already know right now. We got no additional previews. We were not asked for our feedback for upcoming changes. We weren't specifically allowed to talk about the most pressing questions that the community has, like monetization, player retention. None of that was really on the table. We did ask a bunch of questions and we got some answers, some good ones, some bad ones. And that's kind of what I wanted to make this video about. I really haven't seen too many other creators talk about this specifically. And instead of coming late to the party, because the summit was held at 8 p.m. my time, so as soon as it was done, I basically went to bed. I thought I would come and make a video about basically the talking part of the summit itself. So to help me do that, I asked my Discord community to ask me a bunch of questions and I would do my best to answer. So that's what this video is about. It's basically about the intangibles. By the way, if you're not part of the Discord community, there is a link in the description below. It's a good time. I highly recommend you join. And when you get there, tag Oath and tell him that CloudStrike is bad. He'll understand. After I go through these questions, I'll give my own thoughts on the matter and where I think we're going to be headed for the next 6-7 months or so. First question, any discussion at all about paring back monetization in any way? There were some questions about that. We did ask about it, but we were told fairly quickly, we were just going to be talking about the delays here. There were sandbox questions. There were questions about Fireteam Finder. There were specific game questions as well. And we were basically told, hey, listen, we're just talking about the delays. We're talking about the decision to delay and we want to talk to you about this right now. They did say they want to create more opportunities for players to talk to Bungie directly in the future about different things, but that wasn't today. This was just the start. And fair enough, because if they did allow us to talk to them about basically everything, the summit would have been 12 hours long. Did they talk about anything post the final shape? So yes, I don't know if they said this anywhere officially, but they said that episodes are going to be coming after every story beat of the final shape is going to be concluded. They're really emphasizing that every episode, every story related thing will have a beginning, a middle, and an end that is fully self-contained. There was something that was said by a Bungie staff member, I can't remember who it was, but basically they said the extra time allows us to develop more coherent and complete stories, basically allows us to up the quality of storytelling significantly. And you wouldn't do that unless you were invested in the beginning, middle, and end 3-act structure of storytelling, which I think is a net positive for everybody. They also said it might take a while. They are not sure when the first episode is coming. They weren't being very forthright with specific details or release dates. Does Bungie have any plan on making the new light experience better than it is now? So they did say that they're aware that the new light experience is bad. They know it's a pain point. They are working on it, but they didn't have anything specific to share with us at that point. Anything that would kind of be slated for release with the final shape, they weren't very forthcoming with either. If anything, the new light experience would make a lot of sense to perfect for the final shape. Were you speaking to like developers or executives? I don't know if that's a question to be answered. I think I'm able to share this. I believe this is okay to say because in the summit, they were saying you can share details about what happened here, no problem. So the person who was leading the summit was Andy Lunique. He was our host, moderator for the evening. Andy Lunique is the head of global creators for Destiny 2. He's in charge of all the creator outreach programs. He's in charge of what seems like soliciting feedback from creators and from other players as well. There was Cosmo was there, and also Joe Blackburn was there. He was talking for the majority of it. He was answering most of our questions. There were a few other Bungie employees there. To my knowledge, none of the people that I didn't recognize were upper management. I'm pretty sure Jason Schreier said that they don't interact at all with the Destiny community, and so they're largely faceless. I don't think they would change that in light of everything that's happened just now. Overall, did you walk away feeling any sense of hope for the future for Destiny, or were all of our worst fears all realized? Like I said, this was basically an early access preview to the stuff that everybody already knows now. The real meat of the summit was just the Q&A that was held, and from what Joe was saying and how they were answering the questions, they were not afraid to answer some of the harder questions as long as it was on topic with the mandate of delay. So any questions about delays, they were very, very keen on answering, keen on being forthright with what they felt and how they've let people down. So they understand the problem. They understand the pain points. They are very cognizant of the fact that everybody seems to be really pissed with them. They know they've lost trust. They know that they've got a mountain to climb, especially with the 7 months now between Season of the Wish being released and with the final shape coming out. They know they've got it all to do, and they're under no illusion as to how great the task is. So from that perspective, it does comfort me just a little bit. Like they're taking this seriously and they are fully aware of how serious it is. As for are we all saved? It's way too early to tell because these were just words. There was some talk about the content coming out and the tone of which they talked about that content was very, very positive. They were very excited. I mean, like they're kids at Christmas. They're making stuff that they want to play. Absolutely. And we're all going to want to play it as well. Whether we think it's good is another story altogether, but we do want to play it. That's the best way I can contextualize that excitement. But one thing I will also say is that that's been done before in Vidocs and press releases because they had to, because it's marketing and they're not going to be negative about their upcoming release. But I will say that there is precedent for Bungie being excited about something and the community not vibing with it at all. Case in point, Disjunction. Was there any new discussion about power creep and weapon flooding solutions, given many people are realizing that maybe sunsetting wasn't a terrible idea after all? So for those of you who aren't aware, sunsetting has been a frequent topic of conversation both in the Discord and on stream. By the way, you should come check it out. Link in the description below. See you there. And we have talked about the merits of doing it again, why it was so bad last time, and why it would have to be so different this time around if they were going to do anything like that. As for the actual question itself, no answer. We got no answer about that. We did bring it up. Multiple people brought it up. They might have answered it. It was out of scope, but they might have answered it. It was actually brought up quite late into the summit, and at that point it was sort of wrapping up anyhow. Is Gambit dead, but like really dead? Listen, it's been what, like 2 years since they mentioned Gambit or something like that? Something crazy long? Like there's a new Gambit gun? That doesn't count. They didn't mention Gambit. Don't expect mentions of Gambit. Gambit's dead. We all know it. I would like to know how they plan to keep players like me interested in checking back beyond story beats. So I'm going to read you the question that I asked verbatim to set up the answer to this. Regarding the delay, I know this was a necessary step, but do you believe the current lineup of content is sufficiently novel enough to retain players post-holidays, especially given what much wider and bigger concerns about playlist and loot stagnation? That was the best way I could compress that question in a sea of questions that were being asked by every single creator. And they actually acknowledged it. Joe actually read that question and he said, "We're cautiously optimistic." There was a lot of, excitement behind his words, but he didn't say anything terribly specific about that. What he did say is that he was pretty hyped for the content and that their own internal metrics would suggest that they're expecting population numbers between expansion release and the 30th anniversary release. That's how well he believes that the content will do. The reality might be starkly different. We are coming into this period with some of the lowest community sentiment I've ever seen. So whether or not that holds up is another story, but they are hoping for the best and are quietly confident that it will do well. There wasn't a satisfying answer to me either, trust me. Why should I care about new weapons? So this was an interesting one because this was brought up, and it was actually brought up by Joe of all people. Joe was saying, look, I am feeling this as well. I don't really feel the rewards are kind of worth people's times. We're looking at how time investment factors into the enjoyment of the rewards. We're looking at how, new weapons coming out are a reskin of this, that, and the other weapon, and they are building systems to try and mitigate that moving forward. They want the loot to be special again. For episodes, they're looking into making the loot substantially more experiential. Something that's so good or so unique or something that moves the needle and makes people feel something to the point where they'll see a video of it or they'll hear their friend have it or somebody will post a picture of it on Twitter and they'll be like, oh damn, I need this. But that's just for episodes. So we asked the follow-up, okay, what are you doing for the final shape? Is this going to be in the final shape? And Joe said basically, yeah, it is, but we're not doing it automatically. We're kind of asking the rewards team manually, here's this hand cannon. Is it any good? And then really, that is how Joe worded it in the summit. It's like, they're going to the rewards team and they're asking, hey, is this any good? Is this like better than the 50 other hand cannons that we have? And they are going to be curating the loot to be a bit more special. So the answer is you should care about the weapons because they understand the problem with weapons. We were not completely off the money with our own video on it. They know that everything's a reskin. They know the weapons suck and they're looking at making them better. To be honest, my real question is, if it seems positive, how is it really any different from any time we felt slightly positive in the past? Why is this time better than it has been? Obviously, this is the elephant in the room, isn't it, for everybody? This is the cynical take that fuels me and my recent content, which I'm not a fan of. I don't like making cynical content. I never have. But to answer this question, why is this time better than it has been before? It's not. There is no reason to suggest that this summit was any more positive or negative than the other summits. This summit was just a bunch of words, fundamentally. There was no previews, there were no insights as to how things are changing, what are changing, what's coming. We didn't get any play tests, nothing like that. We were just told, hey, we hear you. That's what's up. We know what the problems are. These are the problems. And we know we've messed up. We know we have a lot of work to do. And here's what we're going to try and do. Now, whether or not that translates into positive action that benefits the game, makes the game better, that remains to be seen. Action will always speak louder than words. But in this summit, at this time, they were fessing up to the fact that they fucked up. And that has to count for something. A lot of you will probably just be like, yeah, too little, too late. Very cool. See ya. I'll see you when the game's better. And that's fair too. I'll give you my full thoughts of how I feel about this whole thing after this last question. Was there any discussion about continued PvP support after the initial map pack? With their track record, I don't have much confidence they'll keep up their renewed PvP focus after the maps come up. There was a lot of talk about PvP. And I'm sure you saw Joe Blackburn's video about that as well. But specifically, I'm gonna read what I wrote here because I don't want to mess this up. Yes, there was some mention of wanting to address the inequities of rewards with respect to time taken to actually get them. Joe specifically said, we're asking the question, do I feel like a chump for spending X amount of time here to get Y reward? Which is a very valid question, which is something that PvP players have been asking for literally years at this point. So the fact that they have their eye on the ball with respect to making PvP worthwhile is a huge deal. In a looter shooter, loot comes first. We've been saying it on this channel for I don't know how long. Ever since that video probably back in 2020. Oh my God. About how we fixed the Crucible. When we made our fix to the Crucible, that's probably when we started saying that. He also said that beyond all of this, the PvP Strike team and the developers in general, they want to make PvP more centered around the players who actually play PvP every day and not just like a casual everything for everyone. They didn't say they're going to remove skill-based matchmaking, but in fairness, they probably don't have to. Personally, I think the matchmaking system is good on paper. We just don't have enough population to support it right now. Anyways, I digress. That's another video for another time. So that's it for the actual questions itself. I feel like I've talked about them a lot. What do I think about this whole thing? In the aftermath of the meeting, I was actually quite miffed. Miffed meaning upset or annoyed. Annoyed is the better term, sorry. And the reason I felt miffed is because we were given early access to something that was going to be public knowledge anyways. I left the meeting and I was just wondering, so why are we here? What was the point of that? Like, if you wanted a QA, you could make a thread on Twitter or make a community post on YouTube or create a thread on Reddit. You would have gotten so much more items of feedback from all sorts of different players. You know, not just from the creators and the streamers, albeit big and small. Like, they had a good mix of people there, but obviously we are just a small representation of the wider player base at large. But then I thought about it, I slept on it, and I woke up and I thought, no, hang on. This was more about re-establishing contact with the community. Ever since they went dark at the last summit, when somebody leaked something, they've clearly taken time to re-establish their community outreach pipeline, and this essentially was first contact for the new system. This was the new way of doing things. In hindsight, this was neither good nor bad. It's cool that we were allowed to talk about it with our communities. It's good that we were allowed to go into such detail about it because there is a lot said at these summits, and there is a lot of different perspectives that are represented. Not just PvP, not just PvE, but sometimes casual players too. But leaving that aside, leaving the fact that this was first contact, I think there's a bigger reason why they did this. And that's because there's a 7-month-long season coming up. They needed to reestablish community relationships because I believe their strategy for mitigating the hurt of a 7-month-long season with a questionable standard of content during this time, we don't know how good it's going to be. Guardian games at this point, I mean, you can improve it all you want, but people think of Guardian games and they think it's boring, right? I think the way they want to keep people interested is by rebuilding community relations. If they can be more interactive with the community in a structure and a method that works for them and is a lot more safe and a lot more secure, then I think they're going to do that. I think that's the best way they can do that, because quite honestly, the best way you change the perception of the game is to change the perception of the studio and then to change the game itself. And I think they're doing that in that order, because the game is being worked on. We know it needs time. And I think, honestly, whatever you might think of the recent troubles and where Bungie has gone to in terms of like as a studio, I think you can still agree with the one truth of gaming, which is that a delayed game is better than a rushed game. If the game needs a delay to become the banger that it needs to be in order for the franchise to survive, that's a good thing. I support that. But that sentiment alone will not change the fact that a 7-month Destiny 2 season is gonna suck, no matter how good the content is. And maybe interacting with the community on a more official basis more regularly will help ease that pain. My final takeaway is that they know what they're up against. They know the scale of the challenge ahead of them. They repeatedly said in the summit that we know we have to deliver something close to our very best releases. Forsaken, The Taken King, Witch Queen, maybe all three of them put together. Look, I know this video is not going to satisfy everybody. Everything I've said is basically hearsay. I don't have the receipts. All I can say is, look, I'm not the only person who was there. Some other people have released videos on it. Did they say the same things in their videos that I said in mine? Maybe, maybe not. Just know that I am not somebody who tends to lie about things like this. That's not me. That's not my content. That's not my personality. The people who are going to be in this comment section claiming hearsay, claiming that, this is all very well and good. The detractors basically are going to be detractors no matter what. At this point in the Destiny 2 life cycle, in the community's sentiment cycle, there is always going to be people who are going to be permanently disillusioned with Bungie. And to be honest, that's fine. I'm not here to change your mind about that. I'm here to speak directly to the people who still care about this franchise and they want it to do well. And whilst I personally cannot say anything for certain with respect to the quality of the game and the content that's coming out, I can say one thing for sure. They see it all, and they really fucking care.